Hello everyone. Before we begin, here's a quick breakdown of how I'm going to review every movie. I go off of 5 things: acting, writing, visual/cinematography, editing, and overall vibe. I will then average out all scores from each section and give it a final score. Now you might ask, Keegan, what the hell is overall vibe? Essentially, overall vibe is rewatchability. Would I watch this movie again in the near future? I feel like this balances the playing field a little bit in how I rank every movie. Without further ado, back to our program. Set 20 years after the first Alien movie, Alien Romulus is a sci-fi horror film directed by Fede Alvarez, who also directed Don't Breathe in 2016, as well as the Evil Dead remake back in 2013. The film follows 6 space colonists, Rain, Andy, Tyler, Kay, Bjorn, and Navarro, all down on their luck being stuck on a mining colony planet. Tyler, Rain's ex-boyfriend, discovers an abandoned research space station within the planet's atmosphere via radar, persuading Rain and the rest of her friends to join him, in the hopes of retrieving cryostasis chambers with the ultimate plan to escape to the planet Yuvaga. However, when the crew makes contact with the station and try to take the cryopods, they soon discover the horrors within the deserted station, unlocking its grisly past. Acting, 7 out of 10. The acting in this is good enough. I can tell the actors really tried their hardest with this, but the screenwriting and dialogue just fall short and weakens their performances a little bit. I thought David Johnson, the dude who played Andy, did a really good job of embodying the 2 different android personalities. I felt like it showed off his range well. We'll talk about this fucker later. I also gotta give a shout out to Isabella Merced. This was Kay, the pregnant lady who literally gave birth to a fucking colossal titan. She was the only character I remotely cared about in the entirety of this film, and even then, it was still hard to care for any of these characters in the end due to the writing. None of the characters were bad, all the actors did a decent job, they were just boring and didn't have very unique personalities. Writing, 5 out of 10. Alright, yap session, ladies and gents. The writing is the absolute worst part of this movie. It isn't horrible story-wise per se, it's just hella predictable with the plot as well as the characters and their arcs. It is essentially a mashup between the first 2 movies' plots. You've got the dark and eerie horror aspect of the first one, and then the testosterone-filled nuts-to-butts action of the second. The majority of the characters feel very much like the great value brand versions of past characters, both lead and minor characters. For instance, the asshole character with a jaded past, the main girl boss character, the rough and tough one, the sensitive bitch in the group, and of course, the really intelligent android scientist. Because they were generic copies of other characters, I wasn't emotionally invested in them, making it harder to care for them. Oh yeah, speaking of past characters, Ash is back, sexier than ever, looking like the master from Fallout 1 with his decrepit ass. In my opinion, Rook, or Ash, didn't need to be in this movie. I mean, he wasn't useless in this, it's a cool cameo. I felt like it was kind of a cheap move to bring him back, you know, with the original ship being fucking nuked and all of that, but we could just sweep that under the rug. The idea of Andy swapping out his chip card with Rook's was a cool plot device, however, the farther along the movie went with that, the more generic and tropey the story became. Rook already was a secondary antagonist in the first film, being committed to the company and their success and all that shit, so bringing him back to do it again made the story overall less interesting. If there is really any major criticism I'd give this movie, it's whenever Andy says, "Get away from her, you bitch." Cringe ass actually nerd moment right now. The line, "Get away from her, you bitch," is pretty significant to the franchise, more specifically the final act in Aliens. In Aliens, whenever Ellen Ripley finds Newt, she eventually develops a motherly-like instinct to protect her, facing off against the Queen Xenomorph who's trying to protect her own children. It's very symbolic in the idea of predator versus prey. So whenever Andy says, "Get away from her, you bitch," it just felt out of place and like why would you say that? Like, it just felt undeserved. Like, again, none of the characters had good arcs in this. It just felt really awkward to put that in there. I will say, the director absolutely cooked in the last 15 minutes of the movie. It really saved this, in my opinion, for being kinda mid to pretty good. To be honest, I wish at the end of the movie all the protagonist characters died off. I know it sounds really morbid, but I believe it would have given Rain a more heroic ending when battling the Offspring, given the movie more leverage in terms of how powerful the Xenomorphs really were during this time in the lore. I feel like all the characters got off easily whenever they were battling the creatures. It almost took away some of the actual horror from the movie, making it way less scary. I feel like this would have also gotten me more emotionally invested into Rain's character than I originally was. The ending wasn't bad by any means, it just felt less original in that regard. Visuals/cinematography, 10 out of 10. Holy fuck, this movie is beautiful to look at. Easily the best aspect of this movie. It absolutely nails the late 70s, early 80s vibe of the first movie to a T. Everything in this world feels lived in, it's gritty, dark, the gore, the dismembered body parts, the blood, all of it looks amazing. Also, fun fact of the day, a large majority of the effects in this were practical. Even this zesty ass dude was all practical, which, side note, whenever movies can blend good practical effects and good looking CGI together, that's always a win in my book, and this movie blends it perfectly. Editing, 7 out of 10. As I've said before, the visual and practical effects look insanely good. I think where the editing falls off just a little is that while the pacing's good, it builds a good amount of atmosphere and tension in the cut, with really good solid sound design all around. It does rely on cheap jump scares a little too much, like some of them are spliced way too close together sometimes, to the point where I can pretty much just predict whenever the next jump scare will be. Not only do the cheap jump scares dampen the editing a little, you also get some out of place dialogue here and there. For instance, there's one scene in the movie where Andy and the crew, they like start running from like this large group of facehuggers, and then like they end up closing the door, and then like the facehuggers, they, you know, like crawl on the door more and more and more, and then the camera cuts over to Andy, it zooms on him, and then he says run, and then the crew starts running, and it's like the music has like a blah 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 sound effect, but it's like, it just felt really like a corny trailer moment. Outside of that, it doesn't take away the quality of this movie too much, it's just more or less a personal nuisance. Overall vibe, 6.5 out of 10. This is definitely one of those movies where you can zone out for a bit and not take it too seriously. It's a major popcorn flick. With this movie, you can just hang out with your friends, eat crappy food, maybe get drunk or high, and have a good time. If you can, definitely watch this movie in a theater. It just adds to the cinematic experience overall. Personally, I would rather watch the original 2 films over this. I mean, I know it's unfair because comparing this to the OG movies is like comparing regular feces to diamond-plated military-grade shitlogs hand-delivered by God himself. It's definitely one-sided in that regard. But don't let that take away from your experience of it. It's still a kick-ass movie to watch, and if you're a casual horror fan like I am, you'll have a great time. And if this is the first Alien franchise movie you've seen, it's a really good start to the series. After averaging out all the scores out of all the categories, we're looking at a 7.1 out of 10. If you want to see more videos like this, make sure to like and subscribe, and maybe leave a comment below on which movie you'd like for me to review. Other than that, I will see you all next time.